Habari gani. My name is Norm Strothers, and I have a story for you today. The story takes place, Kujichagulia, the second principle of Kwanzaa. Now, again, back to the story. It takes place in Africa, the country of Ghana. There was a small village, and an old man lived in that village. Now, this old man had 7 sons who helped him to run a farm which had been successful. And the old man was actually raising the 7 sons by himself as mother and father, because the mother had passed away years earlier. The 7 sons were a great pride to the old man, but in the same sense, they were also a disappointment to him. Now, the reason that they were a disappointment was because they argued all the time, from sun up till sundown. They just argued about anything and everything, and just went nonstop, arguing inside of the farmhouse, outside of the farmhouse, in the fields, everywhere. Well, the father eventually passed away one day, and the sons were devastated. They were grieving, and once they grieved the father's death, the next day, the chief of the village called the sons together to explain to them that the father had left them all an inheritance. The inheritance of all of his possessions and his wealth would go to each son if they could meet conditions that he had set forth. Now, these conditions had to do with, number 1, the problem that they had not keeping peace in the family amongst themselves, arguing all the time. That had to stop. The father insisted that the arguing no longer take place amongst his sons. The second condition was that 7 rolls of spools of thread, one was given to each of the 7 sons. They were all of different colors, and each of different colors, I should say. And the sons were to take these spools of thread and turn them into gold, and do this all within the span of before the moon came out that day, that night. Now, the 7 sons left the chief with the understanding of the conditions, and a strange thing happened. When they got back to the farmhouse, there was no quarreling, no arguing, no bickering. As a matter of fact, the oldest son placed his hand in the center of the circle as the boys sat around, and he said, "We must establish peace amongst ourselves in order to carry out the task that our Father has asked of us. Do you agree?" All of the sons grabbed the oldest brother's hand and squeezed hard in agreement. Now, the next task would be to figure out how they were going to turn the spools of thread into gold. They looked at the gold, they looked at the thread and noticed there was no gold nuggets in there. They had to figure how this would happen. Well, the youngest son came up with the idea that they could take the spools of thread, weave them together into a fine cloth of many colors and magnificent patterns, and turn it into something that could return a fortune if they could sell it at the marketplace. The boys all agreed. They decided to work together to do this, so they built a loom, they weaved the material together, and they produced a magnificent cloth as they had hoped. They took the cloth, folded it neatly, placed them in bowls, and placed the bowls on top of their heads and marched to the marketplace. Now, when they got to the marketplace, they started selling their wares as soon as possible, and they were pleased by the large crowd that had gathered and were admiring all of the cloth that was so magnificently displayed. There was an elegant man in the back of the crowd that had gathered around the boys, and he came forward, pushing his way through the crowd, and said, "I must have that material. That is perfect for the king." Come to find out, it was the king's treasurer that was asking for the cloth. He said, "I'll buy this cloth as a gift to the king." The boys thought that this can bring a fortune. A king who would wear our cloth should cost a bag of gold. They requested a bag of gold from the treasurer, and he did present it, bought the material, and the boys were given the gold. They marched back to the village, very happy that they had sold everything that they had, and they went before the chief of the village and they explained to him that they had completed the task that they were set out to do. They sold the material made from the thread that they were given and earned a fortune, and they spilled out the bag of gold in front of the chief to prove it. Now, the chief asked another question. "Did you argue today?" The boys all agreed, "We did not argue, we did not have time to argue, and therefore we finished the second task that we were to complete." They were very pleased with that. The chief was pleased. They went back to their home, and the boys were all very happy except the youngest son. The youngest brother, he was sad, and they asked him why, and he said, "Because we need to share this with the village. How can we share our wealth with the village?" And the boys decided that they would teach the villagers to weave the material as they had, and they could earn a fortune. And to this day, they carried out their task for their father, and they are selling the materials all over the world, and they are known as the boys that completed a task.